Hi everyone, this is Duncan from the podcast Under the Stairs. This particular video you're checking out just now has the archival recording attached to it. The archival recording is from our podography, I think that's the term that we use, and it will feature reviews of movies that fall under the 88 Films Italian Collection series. Now, the vast majority of reviews we've done over the last 5 years have been in audio format and published on our RSS feed for the podcast. We are transitioning over to give you access to all those reviews right here on YouTube under a playlist. Now, we're doing that because we're about to do our first video recording of 88 Films Italian Collection release, that being Tentacles. So there's plenty of opportunity to delve into the back catalogue of the reviews here. And if you like what you hear, then please hit subscribe on the channel, leave your comments below, and check out the rich catalogue of over 1,200 episodes we have on podcasts Under the Stairs on any podcatching device or Spotify that you use. So stick around, enjoy the episode, and I'll speak to you very soon.
The whole village is contaminated. There have been many deaths. Now they're celebrating the funerals.
Bodies have to be cremated.
Wish to God I knew what's happening here.
I insist that the most serious situation we have to deal with is cremating the bodies. Cut it out! Stop wasting your damn bullets, you jerks! You need to hit their heads! I told you! Say like this! Get away! Beat it! Clear out! Goddamn rotten ghouls! Hey! Look out! What's wrong, huh? You disappointed? Sorry, boys, I'm not on the menu after all. Don't let it worry you. I figure we'll all meet again. In hell! Huh? Hurry up, get going. Here they come. Oh, no! What's wrong with this? Who's over there? What happened? I heard some funny noises in the back there.
Hurry. Regan, check the coordinates.
Bastard! No!
Experimental project Operation Sweet Death must be considered a complete failure.
All these high-powered installations, like a factory from a future world, safely hidden.
You're all doomed to a horrible death. Doomed to be eaten up. First they'll kill you.
Get back! You won't get me! No! 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 No!
And welcome back. So, right, you've just heard the trailer for Zombie Creeping Flesh. This is disc number 35 of the 88 Films Italian Collection series, and according to the 88 Films website, here's the blurb. So, legendary schlock master Bruno Mattei, director of Rats Nights of Terror, really outdid himself with the 1980s classic video nasty Bilefest Zombie Creeping Flesh. Banned by the British authorities back in the early days of VHS thanks to its scenes of inner chewing, eye-popping and throat-ripping excess, Zombie Creeping Flesh is a strange moral eco-horror film that warns against the very real terrors of nuclear pollution and chemical fallout as residents in Papua New Guinea are turned into flesh-hungry undead denizens. Directed with the splatter-enthusiastic aplomb that would expect from Mattei, one of the underrated auteurs of the Italian golden age of gore, and penned by the iconic Z-movie Madrick Claudio Fragrasso of Zombie 3 and Troll 2, it's tough to deny that Zombie Creeping Flesh is every bit as eerily entertaining as it was 40 years ago. Now presented uncut and uncensored in an aesthetic presentation that will scissor your senses, Zombie Creeping Flesh is back to chew its way into your living room courtesy of 88 Films and its ever-impressive Italian collection. The movie features a special features high-definition Blu-ray 1080p restoration of the film sourced from the original negative, an uncompressed English soundtrack, an uncompressed Italian soundtrack with newly translated English subtitles, Margie Among the Living Dead, a 2017 interview with Margie Newton, Hell on Earth, 2017 interview with writer and co-director Claudio Fragrasso and screenwriter Rossella Drui, the theatrical trailer, reversible sleeve. The technical specs for the disc, it's region locked to region B. Picture format is HD 1080p 185.1. Audio format is LPCM Mono 2.0. And the language on the disc is both English and Italian with those translated subtitles. The movie is approximately an hour and 40 minutes long. So, where to begin with this one? So it's a video nasty. I have covered this before, but weirdly enough could remember very little of it. A lot of movies on that nasty list, and it was covered as part of doing the nasty. I want to say I maybe enjoyed this one more than I'm going to say I enjoyed it now. It's a difficult one overall because this movie, with a critical eye, see if you're kind of punch drunk having watched all those nasty movies, I think you would be inclined to say, well, it's not as bad as Frozen Scream or movies of that ilk, and you would lean into, well, you know, it's doing something different. And I can't quite remember what I thought of it first time round. I do have memories of kind of championing certain bits, but this time round it was just very clear that this movie is a hodgepodge of a bit of everything, and it makes almost zero sense at all. Now, I know what you're thinking, Duncan. You've said that about a lot of Italian movies, which you would then go on to grade quite highly. It's quite difficult with Zombie Creeping Flesh because everything about this movie feels cynically made. It's not just like the kind of rip-off genre cinema that you get from this part of the world at the best of times. It just kind of feels like everything's been done in a less genuine way to make this movie. I mean, don't get me started on the fact that we are basically ripping off the Goblin sound score to, you know, Zombie Flesh Eaters, almost like completely in its entirety. I think the full soundtrack is ripped off, and how this one didn't get, you know, hunted down legally to an extreme level is beyond me. It appears that the only massive controversy that kind of surrounded its legal involvements were more video nasty based than they were necessarily about plagiarism of the soundtrack. But I mean, scenes here are almost shot for shot retellings of like Dawn of the Dead and Zombie Flesh Eaters in this movie. And, you know, when you're watching it, like, the quality dips, not in the presentation here, the actual restoration's pretty fucking immaculate, but the quality dips in the movie, and that's because the movie itself is a jigsaw piece where pieces don't necessarily fit. What you have here is a fairly pedestrian, fairly basic Zombie Flesh Eaters rip-off. And then you have weird kind of interspersed shots of gore, which Claudio Fragrasso, the writer and slash producer of this project went and shot tons of fucking gore scenes for this movie, which they then like edited in, and maybe made the movie a bit longer than it should have been. So all the narrative stuff that kind of did make sense, it ended up getting cut out. Well, a lot of it got cut out in favour of these gore sequences which don't make sense. And then, kind of flung on top of that, they intersperse some Mondo stuff from like a Mondo movie. I think it was called The Valley or The Village. There are scenes from that are just put in here as well. So not even done in a kind of logical way. Just kind of flung in here to add additional trauma and gore in the movie, and totally out of context of any sense. So ultimately what you have here is a movie which wasn't long enough or good enough to be a movie, which didn't have enough gore in there to satisfy the producers of the movie, who then go and do their own thing, shooting extra gore, putting it in, and then making a movie too long, whilst also taking Mondo material from a Mondo movie and then putting that in here for extra shock value, creating a movie which is too long and then starting to cut out bits of the narrative part from the original movie that made sense, to kind of throw it all together. And then you have on top of that a ripped off soundtrack, just basically steal the soundtrack from the movie we're emulating here to try and pass it off or give it credibility. And then on top of that, you give it to Bruno Mattei, a man who is widely known as the go-to guy for rescuing cheap projects, or a man that will try and give you as much bang for your very limited buck as possible. So when you fling all that together, you're in for something kind of special. And what happens with Zombie Creeping Flesh is there are scenes in it that are brilliant as standalone scenes, but overall as a movie, it is so all over the place and so not well crafted or well held together that it becomes a very disjointed, very frustrating watch. I mean, part of me loves whole sections of this movie, but I don't love the whole thing. The sum of the parts at times are where this movie shines. The overall product is kind of where the movie fails. And I can't remember if I'd reacted this way previously to it. I really wanted to go back and check that episode out, but I didn't want my opinions then to taint something that I did here. I thought a kind of cold viewing would be the best approach. And it just ultimately left me kind of, when I got to the end of it. There's just a whole lot of nonsense going on here, a whole lot that doesn't make sense, and there is very little, if any, attempt to try and tie any of it up. And it's kind of baffling that a movie like this exists. I mean, I can understand to an extent why it may have caught the ire of the censors, who at this time were basically trying to cut anything that maybe even remotely had a zombie in it. And some of the gore sequences are done quite well, actually, considering a very limited budget. But narratively speaking, this movie is just a fucking nonsense. It's a joke, almost. And yeah, the more I watched it, the more I kind of found myself going, this doesn't even make sense. What is my character motivation here? Things that I don't generally need from a movie, but when everything else isn't making sense, you need to give me something to anchor onto, something to hold on tight to get through. Now, I mean, it's still an Italian movie and there are bits and bobs to kind of love about it. Cinematography is actually not too bad at all. Say what you want, Bruno Mattei does have an eye. And the gore is actually pretty well done as well, considering the time period and, like I say, the budgetary constraints. But that's about the end of it. I can't rave about how great the soundtrack is. It is a great soundtrack, but it's not for this movie. It's for another movie, a vastly superior movie, which this movie referenced quite a lot and just makes me want to go and watch Zombie Flesh Eaters instead. So yeah, it doesn't even have like the balls to the wall action that usually accompanies a Mattei movie, where you get tons of action and over the top. You don't really get that here because there just isn't much to play around with, and the story's so pedestrian and generic anyway, you can't really lean into it. It's not a great movie, if I'm honest. It's not a terrible movie, but you know, for all the harping I've done about how bad the Slasher Classics collection is, I have to really be honest when an Italian movie doesn't hit the mark, and this doesn't hit the mark for me. When it comes to a grade for this one, I don't want to spend any more time talking about it. I feel like I've spent maybe 5 minutes too long talking about it. When it comes to giving a grade to this movie, I give it a 2.5 out of 5, somewhere between didn't like it and liked it. I think I might be generous here. I think 2 probably is more where I should land, but like I say, there are a couple of scenes in this movie that do get me smiling, that do give me the promise of an infinitely better movie, which just never manifests. So 2.5 out of 5 for Zombie Creeping Flesh.